on the district will be posted on the district's YouTube page this week. And there's going to be a link in the chat for the YouTube channel for APCD. We would like to start by introducing the panel members, and I will ask Maini and then Jim to introduce themselves. Maini?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this workshop. My name is Mayani Luther, and I am one of the deputy directors for the district overseeing compliance and engineering. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Sweeney. I'm a senior engineer with the district, and I oversee the team that implements the hotspots program.
All right, and we have other district staff helping us with this presentation. So let's go ahead and continue on. Thank you again for attending this public meeting to discuss the status of the 2023 Air Toxic Hotspots Annual Report for San Diego County. Under the Hotspots program, the district is required to prepare an annual report. This is a state program that's implemented by San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. And the report we are discussing this evening was prepared to meet this requirement for calendar year 2023 and provides critical actions completed in 2023, as well as accomplishments of the program since 2021. The draft of the 2023 Hotspots report was released and posted on the district website on March 7 and sent out via district's Gov delivery subscription services on the same day. And the notice for this meeting was also sent out via social media. Our goal this evening is to briefly discuss the 2023 annual report and receive input related to the draft report. But first, I would like to ask Jim Sweeney to provide a short overview of the Air Toxic Hotspots program. And we would appreciate if you can hold your comments and questions to the end of this presentation, on which time you can type it into the Q&A or just raise your hand and we can unmute you and have you ask the question if you prefer it that way. So with that, I'll turn this over to Jim.
Thank you, Nelson. Again, I'm Jim Sweeney, a senior engineer with the district, and I have a brief presentation before we open the meeting up to questions or comments. The California Air Toxic Hotspots Act, proposed under Assembly Bill AB 2588, was enacted in 1987 to evaluate potential health risks from toxic air contaminants emitted by stationary sources. And based on those potential health risks, the program requires public notification to ensure the public's right to know about facilities that create elevated health risks and risk reduction requirements to reduce those health risks. It's important to highlight that the requirements of this program, which are public notification and risk reduction, only apply to potential health risks that come from air toxic emissions from individual stationary sources. Stationary sources include factories or manufacturing plants, power plants, shipyards, landfills, rock or asphalt plants, and other industrial, commercial, or governmental operations. Stationary sources do not include mobile sources, such as trains, trucks, ships, and other mobile sources. Air toxics are chemicals in the form of gases, liquids, or particles that are emitted into the atmosphere, and when people are exposed to them, may cause adverse health effects. And those adverse health effects can range from symptoms such as minor eye or throat irritation or headaches to more serious conditions such as cancer, birth defects, or damage to various organs. The nature and severity of health effects vary by the type and quantity of pollutants, the duration of the exposure, the distance from the source, and the sensitivity of the individual. Again, this program looks at the potential health risks from a single stationary source of air pollution and does not include potential health risks from other sources of air pollution that communities might be exposed to, or potential health risks associated with other factors that can increase those health risks, such as diet, genetics, and smoking. And while the Hotspots program only provides localized potential impacts from a single source of air pollution, the reductions in health risk from that single source helps reduce the overall cumulative health risks that a community might be exposed to. And the California Air Resources Board has recently released a tool to quantify cumulative cancer risk from many sources of air pollution for any area of the state, and we'll discuss that program in a moment. This slide shows the thresholds for public notification and risk reduction in District Rule 1210 for various types of health risks. Public notification and risk reduction are core elements of the program. Public notification ensures the public's right to know about possible health risks from exposure to air toxic emissions from stationary sources. We will discuss the different types of health risks in a moment. Risk reduction requirements involve the development and implementation of a plan to reduce the health risk associated with air toxic emissions. Facilities subject to risk reduction are required to submit an application with a plan to the district proposing changes to their processes to reduce health risks. As an example, a facility can propose to install a control device to reduce toxic emissions, or propose changing the usage of materials containing toxic pollutants, removing equipment which emit toxic emissions, or relocating the operation to increase the distance between the operation and receptors. Both public notification and risk reduction is required if the cancer risk is equal to or greater than 10 in 1 million, and cancer burden is equal to or greater than 1. And for non-cancer health risks, the threshold for both public notification and risk reduction requirements is an acute or short-term or chronic or long-term hazard index of equal to or greater than 1. And this slide shows some of the actions our team completed in 2023. There were 120 emission inventories completed from sources which may emit air toxic emissions. These inventories are very important as they quantify air toxic emissions from stationary sources and preliminarily identify which sources can potentially create elevated health risks. 8 health risk assessments were approved. The health risk assessment estimates in detail the potential negative health effects that sources of air pollution can create. 6 public notifications were held. Facilities that could potentially create negative health effects are required to notify the communities that are impacted. And 6 public meetings were held. These facilities that can potentially create negative health effects are required to hold an initial and an annual, if required by the district, public meetings to provide greater public engagement for the impacted communities. And 6 risk reduction plans were approved. Facilities that can potentially create negative health effects are also required to submit a plan to the district on how the negative health effects can be reduced to an acceptable level to meet District Rule 1210 thresholds. So let's more specifically review the types of health risks that we evaluate for the purposes of requiring public notification and/or risk reduction under this program. Cancer risk is the probability that a person would contract cancer if exposed to a specific level of emissions for 30 years. And cancer risk is expressed in terms of the increased number of chances in 1 million of developing cancer. The health hazard index is calculated for non-cancer health effects and include both acute or short-term health impacts, such as skin or eye irritation, as well as for chronic or long-term health impacts, such as bronchitis or asthma. A health hazard index value below 1 indicates that there are no adverse health effects from exposure to the air toxic emissions. And cancer burden is an estimate of the number of people that can contract cancer within a population that would be exposed to a certain level of air toxic emissions for 70 years.
I'm
It's
sorry,
also
can I just
important-
remind the speaker that he's being interpreted for? So if you could read at a slower pace, yes, thank you.
A slower pace, thank you, I will. It is also important to spotlight the accomplishments of the program since 2021. Recognizing the pressing need to safeguard the health and well-being of our communities, the District Governing Board in 2021 adopted requirements aimed at reducing potential health risks from cancer by a staggering tenfold. These requirements also reduced the health risk thresholds for non-cancer to require risk reduction for non-cancer health effects as well. This critical decision in addition to other rule changes adopted by the board, resulted in the accomplishments presented on this slide. This isn't just about data or statistics. It's about the health and safety of our families, our neighbors, and our future generations. There have been a total of 11 risk reduction plans that have been approved by the district and fully implemented by the facilities, meaning 11 facilities have reduced their risk to their neighbors, resulting in risk reduction and protection from elevated health risks for 1,629 residences, such as homes, condos, and apartments, 1 public park, and 59 businesses. This map shows where the facilities that have had to reduce their risks are located around the county, as well as the status of those risk reduction efforts. The blue stars shows the facilities which have had their risk reduction plans approved by the district and have been fully implemented. The green stars shows the facilities whose risk reduction plans have been approved by the district and they are in the process of being implemented. And the yellow stars show facilities which were required to submit health risk reduction plans to the district, and those plans are being reviewed by the district. So this slide shows the risk reduction plans that were approved just in 2023. BAE is a shipyard in San Diego, and they have started to use alternative technology for connecting pipes to reduce the amount of welding done, and therefore the hexavalent chrome and nickel emissions that come from welding. CompuCraft is an aerospace parts manufacturer in Santee, and they are now required to use air pollution control filters on their abrasive blasting cabinet to reduce nickel emissions. GKN Chemtronics is an aerospace parts manufacturer in El Cajon, and they conducted source testing to more accurately quantify their on-site nickel emissions and use those actual emissions to refine the health risks. Pacific Ship and Repair, a ship repair and fabrication facility in San Diego, has added air pollution controls to their welding operations to reduce hexavalent chrome and nickel emissions. The Vulcan Materials rock and aggregate plant in Mira Mesa removed equipment which emitted toxic emissions, and as a result, reduced arsenic and nickel. And the Vulcan asphalt batch plant in Otay Mesa increased the controls for their street sweeper, used to sweep their paved haul road, and used more efficient filter bags in the air pollution control equipment for the asphalt plant to reduce arsenic and nickel emissions. And again, as a whole, a total of 11 risk reduction plans have been fully implemented since 2021. Public engagement is a core element of this program. As part of our dedication to accountability, transparency, and community involvement, we've launched an interactive mapping tool on the district's website. You can see the web address and QR code for the tool on this slide. Now, with just a few clicks, anyone can access vital information regarding facilities subject to this program, including which facilities are required to do HRAs, the results of those HRAs once they're approved, and who has to do public notification and risk reduction, the public notification documents and risk reduction applications, the areas impacted by facilities with risks above the public notification threshold, and the boundaries of the portside and international border environmental justice communities and Cal EnviroScore results. And as mentioned earlier, the Hotspots program only assesses potential health risks from individual stationary sources and therefore doesn't include cumulative health risks from multiple stationary sources or from mobile sources.
By the way, Jim, in case you did not mention this, HRA refers to health risk assessments.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Melissa. So the California Air Resources Board has also launched an interactive mapping tool under its California Air Toxic Assessment, or CATA program. This mapping tool shows the cumulative cancer risk in areas of California from all stationary and mobile sources of air toxic emissions. The picture on the slide is from the CATA mapping tool showing San Diego County. And the web address and QR code on the slide would take you straight to the San Diego results. On the left side of the picture, you can see the average countywide cancer risk in the area in chances per million, as well as the breakdown by pollutant and type of source. And when you're on the tool, you can zoom in on smaller areas and it will show the average cancer risk within that smaller area. The right side shows the areas of higher cancer risk show up in darker colors. As previously mentioned, public engagement is a core element of this program. Here are some more tools available to stay informed of updates and new developments under the program. One is the homepage for the district's website, shown on the slide. At the bottom of that page, we have links to our social media accounts and also to an email subscription service for receiving notifications and updates from the district. This is a good way to stay informed about this program and other things the district is doing. Just be sure to select Air Pollution Control District News to receive these. And last, if you want to contact us about this program, including submitting any comments about this draft report, please use the APCD engineering email address shown. For the next steps, the district is interested to receive your input and answer any questions you have. Besides the comments and input we get tonight, if you have further comments that you want to be considered for inclusion in the report that will go to our governing board, please submit them in writing by close of business on April 2nd, 2024. That's 2 weeks from today. We will present the final report to the district's governing board at their May 9th governing board public meeting and ask the board to approve the distribution of the final report, and then we'll proceed with the distribution. Most importantly, the district is committed to continue implementing the requirements of this program. As previously mentioned, our primary goal this evening is to receive your input and feedback. If you have comments or questions, please either type them into Q&A or raise your hand to be unmuted. And again, if you have comments after this meeting, please use the email address listed on the previous slide and submit your comments to the district by April 2nd. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And just for everyone's information, the slides that were used this evening will be posted on the district website tomorrow. So you can go back and look at the email addresses and QR codes and all that. So that concludes our presentation, but like Jim said, we are here to listen to your input and answer any questions and get feedback and comments from you. So if you have any questions or comments, you can either type it in Q&A if you don't have audio and don't want to raise your hand, or just simply, it's pretty informal meeting tonight. You can just raise your hand and ask the question. Either way is fine with us. So are there any questions or comments? And we do appreciate you attending the meeting this evening.
As of right now, there doesn't look to be any raised hands or questions in the Q&A.
Okay. And if you also have any questions in Spanish, you can also ask those and our translator will translate it into English so we can respond to that as well. There's a hand raised by Neil Davenport. Neil, go ahead. Michelle, can you unmute Neil, please? Go ahead, Neil.
Hi, Mohsen. I work as an engineer in this field. If you could go back to the slide that had the CARB mapping tool that displayed a population-wide cancer risk value. Just wanted to ask the district to put in context what that data point means relative to the stationary sources that are the subject of the hotspots program? My understanding is that particular risk example shared is not singly stationary sources. It goes beyond the hotspots program. So just if you could elaborate on that, and then also, can you provide any context for facilities cumulative risk in the San Diego area, stationary sources? What is that approximate risk level relative to this data point? If you even have that information.
Thanks, Neil. Very good question, and appreciate you asking us. So this is the slide that Jim had put up earlier to show the cumulative cancer risk associated with air toxics from all sources. And again, as mentioned by Jim, this includes not just stationary sources, but it also includes mobile sources and other sources of air toxics emissions. So the 485.5 chances per million to contract cancer is associated with all of those sources. As you can see in the first kind of pie chart on the left, top left, it shows that the about 78% of all that risk is from diesel particulate. Diesel particulate is the compound that is released into the air as a result of burning diesel fuel in combustion sources. Most of the diesel is utilized in mobile sources such as trucks, trains, and some of the ships also burn bunker fuel that is more like diesel. And so the majority or more than three quarter of the cancer risk is associated with that compound. The other quarter or 1/5 is associated with volatile organic compounds, and those are emissions that come from use of solvents and paints and some from combustion sources as well. And then a small percentage of the cancer risk for heavy metals, and heavy metals refer to compounds such as hexavalent chromium, cadmium, nickel, arsenic, and those can be released from various types of operations, including dust from fugitive dust from haul roads when they're trafficked on if it's unpaved. The next pie chart slide below that shows the sources of diesel particulate, and as you can see, about half of it is from on-road mobile sources. These are vehicles that are on the freeways and on the streets. And then they're broken down by other sources. The majority are coming from on-road vehicles, and then you can see that there are other locomotives, for example. And if you can go a little farther down, I don't know if that slide shows all the other sources, but it does have aggregated area sources. Area sources are sources that are not required to obtain a permit, but you can have some other smaller backup generators and things of that sort that could represent create diesel particulate emissions from their operation. And then as far as
Melissa, just real quick, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you so much for the explanation. I just wanted to also point it out that this is just a screenshot of the mapping tool, right? And so this mapping tool has a lot of information, and that's why we put the QR code as well as the address in the event anybody is interested in exploring this tool. But the whole point here is really to highlight that the Hotspots program, this whole workshop is about the Hotspots program, which is implemented by the district. That program only applies to stationary sources of air pollution, which includes power plants, diesel engines, equipment that essentially doesn't move. In addition to those emission sources, we have other sources of air pollution, especially mobile sources, trucks, trains, buses, and things of that nature. So what we want to point it out here is that the hotspots only apply to a portion of emissions and health risk. And this mapping tool is more comprehensive because it projects potential health risks from all sources of air pollution. But again, this slide is only a screenshot, so it's not, it doesn't represent everything that the tool offers. So I think the best way to explore this is to assess this mapping tool and see what's available.
Thank you, Manny. That was very good explanation, and it is something that we just wanted to let you know about. It is not part of the air toxic hotspots program, but it is a very useful mapping tool that anybody can go to and look at to find out. So I hope that answered your question, Neil.
It does. I just like the public to be aware of stationary sources represent a portion, arguably less than half of community risk is coming from stationary sources and facilities that are being presented in the annual report.
Right,
Yeah,
and
I
we
think the
wanted to
important-
point out that in addition to the health risk from the stationary source, we're all exposed to health risks that comes from other sources of air pollution, right? And so, you know, and there are a lot of initiatives statewide and at federal level to control emissions from stationary sources, because it is, you know, as you mentioned, Neil, the contribution from mobile sources is pretty significant.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that the importance of the air toxic hotspots program is that it looks at very close distances to the stationary sources and identifies what the risk is to the community that lives around those sources just from that source alone. So that's I think it's the difference between looking at the overall risk versus what's coming from a specific single source. But very good question. Thank you, Neil. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the Q&A at this time, but if anybody wants to just raise your hand and we can unmute you, ask a question. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Once again, please feel free to send us your comments or other input by April 2nd. We will take those all into consideration before we present the final report to the governing board on May 9th. And once again, thank you for participating this evening's meeting. I know it's your family time and you take time away from your family to participate in this meeting. So appreciate it. Any last words, Miney or Jen?
No, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, so we'll adjourn the meeting at this point. Thank you all.